welcome to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. I'm super excited to have our guest on today. That's right, Randeep Lally. That's right. I'm super excited because that's the first time I got to use those little pads. So I gave you the proper little introduction. But we got Randeep Lally here joining us. He is not a new realtor per se, but he did just do his first transaction. So I'm excited to have him on because I wanted to get your perspective of kind of going through that process, getting your first deal under your belt and things like that. But where I want to start is kind of getting some context of, why did you get your real estate license? When did you get it? Things like that. I've actually mentioned you in a couple other podcasts that we've had where I talk about I had, a couple buddies get their license with me, and you so happen to be that other buddy. But I want to kind of get your perspective because, you didn't have to do it and you did it for some reason. So go ahead and tell us about that.
So a little background. Mac and I used to work together. We met, working for the Boy Scouts of America. So Mac had his own business in Midtown. He had his own gym, and right next door was the brokerage we're both signed with now. And slowly Mac just got into some work with our broker Paul, and Mac mentioned it to me. He was like, "Hey, this looks like a great opportunity. We should do this, and we should study and get our license." He's like, "I think this is a great opportunity for us as individuals to grow, help our family members, friends, whoever, but also another good investment. Just to not only make more money, but I think it's just like it's a great business to be in, to learn about investing as well. Whether that's flipping houses or renting or using a real estate license to just save up to have that first step in a rental property. Just trying to build your assets for the future. So Mac was the reason why I got into real estate. We went through it together. We the whole study process. It was a little challenging. There's a lot of information. I thought I'd take that test when I walked out, but luckily, I passed because you don't want to fail.
I didn't think you didn't pass it because every time we took a quiz and you had barely studied, you were getting the highest score on the quizzes, which didn't make any sense because I spent probably 3 times more studying, but you would just it would go in your head and it would be locked in for some reason. I don't know. It's crazy. Your brain's like a mousetrap.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, when it comes to memorization, I could remember quite a bit of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Just how I've been. I think I studied for 8 days, maybe 9 tops for that real estate test. And
yeah, I studied way longer. My process for studying, though, is I like to be extremely thorough for my exams, and I like to feel really confident about it. That's important to me. So, and I guess I never really thought about it until after I got my loan license, but I don't hold stuff in my head super well, I think. But I've always liked learning, and so I think that eventually I learn it. But I learned this from you and from our broker that you guys both retain stuff super quickly, and it's very annoying because I feel like I have to work the hell way harder than you guys to be able to do it. But it's interesting kind of going back, to us getting started in real estate. Essentially, we were working for a nonprofit, and at the time there was a big transition nationwide with their program, and there started to be other issues with the program that I was concerned about. And so I thought, if anything, real estate would be a viable option. If anything happened, we were going to get fired or laid off or, whatever the case may be. And I think that for me, obviously, I transitioned directly from that work to this work. So for me, it actually worked out and was a viable option and allowed me to get my foot in the door of real estate, which initially I started with only doing the media side, and then eventually getting my real estate license and then getting my LO license. But I kind of saw the writing on the wall beforehand that we were already doing jobs that were 60 to 100 hour weeks, and there was more going to be added onto that, right? So, but I don't know if you saw that, right? I think you just were like, all right, like, I don't know if it's something to do or.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really paying attention to that. I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna keep doing my thing. I didn't really think about how big of an impact it would make after that transition happened and how it actually really was going to affect us. So I'm glad you saw it. Glad you pulled me out, and I think I stayed there a little bit longer than you did when you transitioned out. But then yeah, after that I did transition into the state. So for
Which is
me,
which is where you wanted to be the whole time anyway.
it did, I mean, state career is good. It's, you got the decent pay, you got the benefits like everyone's always talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The part that sucks is, we don't get to make our own schedule anymore. That was, its own benefit, and the way it functions from, the public sector to the private sector is a lot different.
Sure.
But yeah, so for me, I still do I guess you could say an 8 to 5, but then I do real estate on the side. That's just something I do, through word of mouth, really through like family, friends saying, hey, I know so-and-so who might be interested in, purchasing a home or selling. So, but yeah, I mean, I just did do my first deal. It was a lot different than I think most deals will go. But if you're a real estate agent, you're dealing with, clients, and there's like a language barrier as to where I was. You'll be doing a lot more of the heavy lifting. There's a lot more you would have to do to help them out because of that language barrier. So
right.
I think it was a good first deal. I think it was a little challenging. There was a lot to do, because of the barrier, but I think it really helped me learn the process, and it really did, it just made me better as an individual to help the next person out going down the road. Be like, hey, this is going to be some of the, the barriers. This is going to be some of the challenges, but now it's just for me like, hey, I know this is going to happen. So it's easier to prep and just make sure, it's a smooth process for them as well. I mean, we did do a 21-day close, and we did close on time. There were some hurdles, but, we had a great team that we have. So, I mean, we made it through, and yeah, I think my clients are happy with their home. They're loving it. So, yeah.
So contextually, we were really lucky to get hired into when we worked for nonprofit. We were really lucky to get hired into a team that was already one of the best teams in the country. They had a really strong management in place. They had now, in retrospect, because I know you've done some other training, they've had a pretty decent training program in place, an opportunity for that. And we worked under some pretty good people who had some success already, and we're bringing in kind of that new group of guys, right, or new group of people that were going to start making that impact. And so you and I were hired relatively close to each other, right? Like maybe 3 months apart.
Yeah, just like a couple months.
Yeah, 3 months apart. And I worked in the greater Sacramento region. I have kind of like what you would call the epicenter of where we do a lot of stuff and where the impact happens. And Randeep, because you live out in Yuba, were higher, right?
Right.
And what areas did you cover?
So, when we first began, I had Yuba, Sutter, and Colusa counties. So that was my area. So, it's a lot of the, smaller towns, you could say. And so it was pretty spread out.
Well, the one thing I really liked about working for the scouts that have translated over to real estate is that, like, I know every single elementary school in the Sacramento region. Not the region, in the Sacramento city area, right? I know every single school. I had an opportunity to talk to almost every single principal, and I know every kind of micro community because we spend so much time in the community. I think I had somewhere around like 50 to 60 Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, we call them units, that we look over, right? All the way from West Sac, all the way going into almost Folsom. And so I know that's a really, for me, was a unique takeaway from that experience, is that we know the area pretty well. We know the communities pretty well. And do you feel like that's pretty similar for you?
Oh, absolutely. So for my clients right now, the home they did purchase, I did mention that the I guess what would you call it? So it's an elementary and middle school combined. So it's a K to 8. I said that that school they just bought a home and it's the best in town. I was like, this is where folks want to send their kids. If there's folks who will do the little paperwork, at the district office to transfer their kids from one school to the other because they want it. And I was like, you guys are purchasing a home in that district where your kids will go to school from K to 8 right there, and right around the corner is the high school, which is probably like 5 minutes from their house. So it does make a huge impact because when individuals go to purchase a home, one of the things we like to tell them is like, hey, you're gonna purchase a home, but you have kids or you're thinking about kids. Hey, think about these, like this. These schools are in the area. This is right here. So it's something that does help make it helps them make decisions. And I think it's something they need to know. Be like, hey, it is very important to a family to know what schools are in the area for their kids.
Absolutely. And that's the majority of our transactions are done with families, right? With family in mind. And so being able to transition from essentially being forced to know every microcosm of a community, right? And being able to translate that over to real estate is extremely helpful. And I think it gives us an opportunity to stand out in the crowd, right? Because how many people I did in one, we do, did these recruitments where we have to go to the schools multiple times. We talk to the kids, we do sign up nights, we talk to principals, we talk to teachers. In one given year, I did 50 of those. And so that's 50 different schools that I learned the communities by driving there, that I learned the principals, I learned the teachers, I learned the school, I learned the rankings, and I learned, about the families that are in those communities that now I can translate and you can translate into helping people find homes that not only, the school they go to, things like that, but we learn, what are their stores around there? What are the entertainment around there? Because these groups of kids are engaging in that stuff in that community, right? So I think that's a really interesting thing that we're able to take from, scouting and working in nonprofit sector into this space. But the reason I wanted to have you on, not only because, we're friends and we kind of went through this process together, but you got your license, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, the end of 2020,
Right.
right? Or
So,
no, end of 19.
yep.
Sorry, end of 19, right before the lockdown.
Exactly. So it's been a long time and you didn't do a transaction. I think this is a very common thing that happens in the real estate industry, right? You have you have full-time like career people, like this is my career, this is what I do full-time. You work for the state and this isn't even really part-time for you yet. It's kind of like you're a resource to those that are close to you that want to do it, right? And this was a really unique experience because traditionally, I would say stay away from people who don't do a lot of real estate, right? Because it's just, you want somebody that's knowledgeable in the industry. But because you and I partnered together, and you were, the reason I was kind of talking about the nonprofit we worked for is we worked, in one of the best groups, but then we elevated, and you and I were one of the top people in the country for what we did, right? Because everything is ranked in what we did. And so you and I were, for all intents and purposes, the top performers out of 2,000 to 3,000 employees who did the job that we did, which is very demanding through the country, right? And so I know that you work hard. I know that you're knowledgeable. I know you're going to do the work when you say you're going to do the work, which is the backbone of the job, right? Maybe some of the other stuff, like how do you write a contract effectively? Like how do you, negotiate certain things? That's why you and I are partnered together, right? We work on that together and we make the dream happen. And so this is a good example of understanding the people that you work with. And this is a good example of why I wanted to get you on, because I know that you're interested in doing, kind of transitioning a little more to being kind of a part-time realtor, right?
Right.
So this is a good perspective, right? Because I've been trying to tell you, like, hey, you need to talk to somebody, you need to do something. And you've had family members buy houses. Like, I'm like, dude, you got to come on, don't go tell somebody. And it finally clicked and you finally did. And it worked out in your favor, right? And
Yep.
you realize that the job, especially, you're an extremely knowledgeable person, isn't as hard as it seems.
Right.
I mean, and we'll get into the transaction itself, and I want to get your experience on that. And I'll get my experience from, kind of a coach, as well as, being the LO on your deal. But it's a very unique take, right? To get somebody right after their first transaction who didn't dive into real estate super hard, but kept paying their dues every year to the NRA, to CAR, to the Sacramento Association, to keep their license, right? Because you knew eventually you would use it.
Right.
Right. So let's talk about the transition or the transaction, right? Let's talk before, all the way up to when you submit the contract. What was that like for you?
It was stressful because, first deal we did 21-day close. So, it gets a little tough when, there is a language barrier. Your clients, they're not.
Oh, that's right. We forgot to mention that his clients spoke some English, but primarily Punjabi. So that can always be difficult. And we work with a lot of families that don't, English is not their first language. And so that's a struggle in itself, not only on the side of getting everything we need, but making sure that they feel comfortable with, buying an extremely large purchase.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's hard because they're also, first time home buyers. So they had a lot of questions. I was, like Mac is saying, I got my license a few years ago, but it was my first deal. So, having that great team in place is what was key. Having Mac, as my LO, having him as a resource, having, our broker as a resource, it really, it helped make the transaction smooth, especially knowing, like, one thing I learned was like, hey, if you don't know the answer, don't try to BS your way out of it. Just be like, hey, look, I don't know that answer, but I'm gonna give a call to my LO. I'm gonna give a call to my broker. I'm gonna find out, and I'm gonna tell you what the proper answer is. Because my clients came back to me and was like, hey, so and so said this, so and so said that. There's people out there that will tell them stuff, and we're like, no, that's not true.
Yeah,
or,
the
no,
internet
that's
experts, right?
right.
They heard
Exactly.
it. They heard it here. They heard it there.
Right, exactly. So then, but I was like, hey, you got to read between the lines. This is what they're not saying. This is what's going to be the side effect of that. So there's stuff like that. So it's like you really just got to be like, hey, don't, you can come ask me what they tell you, but just don't take their word in stone. Be like, hey, that's completely true,
Right?
Because it's there's a lot to it, and I wanted to make sure I got them the proper information. So not for them, speaking barely any English, not tech savvy. So it was a little different, So all the paperwork, that Mac originally would just email them, be like, hey, I need these documents, this and that. It was more me like, hey, I'm going over, hey, I'm, scanning them, sending them over, hey, Mac, is this good?
Yeah.
And
Well,
making sure.
luckily we set up a practice, right? Because you had been working on the deal for like 6 months, right? Because there was like a starting point, and then it slowed because of the market, and then they got it back into a position where they wanted to move forward, right? This is very common in real estate, right? Sometimes people need to take a pause to get things lined up, but the way that our partnership works, the way that our brokerages partner and work, is that we do full pre-approvals. That means that we run credit. That means that we do our back system engines to make sure that they're fully qualified. And so you and I had already kind of done that back and forth, but with them, to make sure that we're getting paperwork and getting documents. And so we kind of were in the practice before we had got into it. And I think this is an extremely important thing to make sure you're doing. This is why I think it's so valuable to work with either real estate agency and that is attached to a brokerage like ours at Orbit, or to work with a realtor who has a very strong partner with their with their LO or their lender, because you saw firsthand that this deal would not have got done if we were not constantly communicating.
Oh yeah, big time. There was that was huge because there was a lot of hurdles from the loan side. It was the stuff the clients didn't know about. Like it just popped up because we were doing the pre-approval and the stuff like that. So yeah, communication is key. It is a lot of customer service. There's going to be a lot of questions. It's just having that customer service, having that close relationship with your team that really makes it smooth and makes it go forward. So especially when you're trying to close the deal in 21 days, you do need to communicate because you cannot lose time. That is super valuable in this.
Yeah, if we ever lose time, we don't want to be we don't want it to be because of the realtor or the loan, right? It's
Right.
either it's the appraisal, it's the inspections, it's something outside of our control that we lost time and we tell the other party, right? Which means that you and I have to be on the ball, competent, and ready to move, which you can do, right? Because look, this is your first transaction, and we didn't have any delays because of the real estate side. And we didn't have
Right.
any delays because of the loan side because you were so diligent in making sure we got what we got, right?
Right.
And I think we actually got the clear to close. We did a 21-day close. I think we got it on day 19.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. No, before that. Way before that.
We got it. I think we got it a few days before because it
Yeah.
was because we had to do the Sutter County took the longer time. Remember the whole.
Yeah, so we got from the loan side though. So we actually, I remember we got 15 days. We got the clear to close, right? Which is fast. But you're right. Sutter County had a delay on their side for recording, and so it took a couple days to close, but we closed on time, right?
Yep.
So ultimately, we had that kind of 6 months where we were working together, trying to find them a house. They were very distinct among where they wanted to be, what community they wanted to be in, what sort of house they needed, right? Because they're kind of a larger community that host people at their house. And so, what was that like trying to go through I know you spent some time, you've done some trainings with us, and obviously I've talked to you about real estate over the last 3 years. But what was like your experience, like navigating the MLS, trying to find them a house, sending stuff over to them? What was that like for you?
It was a little challenging because like you said, they did have something in mind as where they wanted to live, and so especially when you're working with a family, not everyone's gonna agree on the same thing. So it's really just mediating, be like, hey, these are the pros, these might be the cons. Like, hey, I know this way is not what you want, but why don't we go take a look? Because you never know. So it was a little challenging. It really did limit the market, especially with how competitive it has been. So it was a lot harder to try to find him something. But it was just not saying, hey, they said no to this, but like, what, maybe they might say yes. Let me just show them
Right.
anyways. Be like, hey, I know this is not what you're looking for, but why don't we just take a look? Be like, I think this is what's unique about this house. These are the benefits. And you could take a look. You could say no. It's just going out there. There's no harm in just going to do a showing.
Yeah.
'Cause
Well,
you never
I
know what's gonna
think
happen.
at any given time, there was maybe 3 to 5 houses available that made sense for you,
Yep.
right? Because they wanted something that was a little more modern. I think early 2000s at the
Yep.
most. But I'd say you say a little more modern. That was like 20 years ago, but still,
I mean,
right? Because you started this transaction started for you at the beginning of 2022, and maybe even a little bit earlier for the lending side. And you kind of were going through that roller coaster with me, with rates starting to go up and drastically, like doubling and things like that. And not to mention that they're also contracted employees, they are farmers. And so that's if you don't have the right lender, they don't know how to navigate that correctly, right? Because a lot of lenders deal with W-2 only or things like that. So that
Right.
was a really struggle. And then we were trying to put them into a house where the price range was pretty stuck. And then the rates started going up, but the house is started going down. Right. So
Right.
then more houses started to come in that were making sense, but maybe they weren't, exactly what they wanted. And that's what you're saying. And then from my background in the media side for real estate, I would tell you go show them, because 95% of realtors take terrible photos. They're not, either they take terrible photos and they look way worse than they are, or you have the 5% that take really good photos, but because they're really good photos, they're misleading,
Right.
right? So
Right.
it's hard to tell, really. Go look in person. That's what you guys are doing, and then eventually, I think we wrote an offer. It did get accepted, but I think we had to pull out, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
There was an
then
offer
go ahead.
when we pulled out.
Yeah, and then we wrote the other offer, and that one got accepted, right?
Right.
So that was good. We got your offer accepted. You and I and Paul, our broker, we went over the contract multiple times to make sure, hey, this is, because you'd done some training on it before, but you'd never personally written one. And
Right.
so we kind of went through it together. We explained to you, like, this is what this stuff is. This is how you can be more competitive, but you need to talk to your clients, right? And eventually we settled on criteria that got the offer accepted,
Yep.
which is pretty
Exactly.
excited.
That was the training. It was good, especially knowing how to negotiate was key, because I think we did close for 25K under on the home,
Hmm.
but there was some stuff that we had gone over that we put in the contract saying, hey, we'll do this, this, and this if you bring the price down of the house to what my clients are willing to pay, because
Right.
it was listed for over their budget amount, but it was this the hey, we'll do the 21 day close. Hey, we will do this and this if you could bring this price down. So the home was what they wanted. They were looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but luckily we lucked out and we got a 4-bedroom and 2.5 bath. And it was built in '04, something they wanted the early 2000s. And something that's unique about this house that my brother and my mom really liked is the outside actually has a portion of it done in brick. So it gives it that little country look. So which a lot of folks now are starting to do. So I think we got a really good deal for them. I think they live in a good community, a good area. They're no longer on one side of town, because usually they're where they were renting before. They
Right.
were on the opposite side of town, where the only thing they had was in that area was a gas station. They had to drive about 10-15 minutes into town. So now it's just like, hey, they could get up and go to Walmart in 5 minutes or Lowe's in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, you put
And
them in a little bit a better
yep.
area for their overall life.
Yep.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah, that's kind of what we wanted, right? I mean, it's so interesting to have, a first, essentially, I'm going to call you a first time realtor, right? First time
Absolutely.
transaction, doing your first time deal. And granted, you had a much larger knowledge base because we've spent so much time talking about it, but you know, you identified their real needs. And I know that you and I would go back and forth about on this, and I would tell you, and you'd be like, no, they really need this because they're going to do these sorts of events through the year. They're going to host people at their house. They really need this. And I think you identified the area they needed to be in really well and found them a house that made the most sense. And you and I made sure that they were going to be able to afford it, right? It wasn't just can they actually get into the house and get the financing, but were they going to be in a position to be able to afford that monthly payment and not feel like they're drowning every month, right?
Right.
Right. So we get the transaction accepted, and we're going through that process. Now, keep in mind that because Randeep was also the translator, he had to do a lot more things that realtors don't normally do, right? Like getting these documents. Normally, when I'm collecting documents, I'm sending it directly to the borrower. But Randeep was kind of that intermediary for us to make sure that we got documents to us in a timely manner. Explain kind of what that was like, because I know that you had to spend time driving over there, if not every day, almost every other day. And you were constantly, what did it feel like to have to do that, do your job, and then also, communicate with me to make sure that you were up to date on what's going on the transaction, right?
Right. So yeah, my days during those 21 days were long. Because I start work at 7, so most days, depending on if I'm working from home or in the office, I'm up by 5:30 or 6. So another thing that was going on during this 21-day close was, it's like Max said, they're farmers, so harvest season just begun. So my clients were working from 6 to 6 every single day. So um, my days were long because I'd be up already by like 5:30 in the morning, and then my day didn't end till about 8 or 9 p.m. because I had to go over in the evening to their house and be like, hey, this is all the stuff we need. We need signatures. These are what the documents are. Going through those with them and making sure they're informed, they know what they're signing, and making sure, be like, hey, I need you to, like, at your lunch, go run to the bank, or go, I need this document, make sure somebody gets me this document so I could get it back over to you, or the other realtor's transaction coordinator. So it did make my days long. It was hard. I mean, I was working quite a bit. It was a challenge, especially because we went to close right as harvest season began, so that was something different. I don't think that was something I was expecting, but it was, it is what it is. So,
Yeah,
um,
it landed on a weird time to start,
yeah,
especially with the shifting market. That was really weird as well. And then on top of that, you were learning how to get disclosures done on the real estate side, while learning what documents you need on the loan side, right? So you
right,
were really kind of learning two different things at once, and then you were trying to figure out how to execute it correctly without losing us time, right? So it
right,
really spread your days out. And I think you did a pretty good job of that, considering right now. Luckily, at Orbit Realty, we have really good back end systems that make that process a little bit easier. And then on the loan side, same thing with Orbit Home Loans, but also, our partnerships with our lenders, right? We work with every major lender in the country. Our partnership with our lender, because we've been around for so long, we have really good things in place that will allow us to really expedite things, and a camaraderie with them that allows us to really kind of move things forward. So that process was fun. And not only that, the unique thing about, like, when I team up with my realtors is that I stay available, right? So oftentimes you were messaging me at 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night to make sure we were getting the right documents, which doesn't always happen with every, LO, because, well, most people have a work life balance, right? But when we partner on something, I try to make sure that we're going to get it done the way we say we're going to get it done, right?
right.
So we go through the process. You're learning how to get these disclosures done. You're learning how to do all this stuff, and we're getting closer to closing it. How's that feeling for you? Right? Because even when we were getting close to closing, we weren't like 100% sure we were going to close on time, because that's just the way transactions go. And I know you were getting a little worried. They were getting worried. They wanted to buy furniture. They wanted to buy a refrigerator. They wanted to buy a washer and dryer. This is very typical for first-time home buyers, and they want to know when can they get them delivered.
Yeah. So that, we were coming to the end, but at the same time, we were close, but yet we were still far, because, right at the end of it, we had that delay with Sutter County in the recording. So, that was something where we're like, hey, no, we can't, I had to tell my clients, be like, hey, you can't go, run to Lowe's and open up a new credit card, because I was like, this still isn't complete until, we get the key, until they say it's a done deal. We can't do anything. We got to wait. So that was challenging, because, they were renting, so they didn't have the necessary appliances ready to go into their new place. They needed some furniture because, they're moving into a bigger place. They needed some necessities because they knew before they moved in, they wanted to have like a prayer at the house. They wanted to have family over. They wanted to make sure they could get, you know, all their utilities set up. So there was a lot they wanted to do, but we said, hey, you got to wait. We still don't know it's not the official green light, even though we're so close. So it was a tough, because we had to explain that to them. And not only that, they were working 12-hour days, and they're like, hey, we got to set aside some time. We can't just keep taking so much time off.
Right.
But, you know, until you get that key, I would say I waited to be like, hey, we need the key. Let me find out, it's recorded with the county. We get that official email back from our lender saying, hey, everything's good to go. So that way, I was able to give them the green light, be like, hey, now you can do everything that you're wanting to do.
Mm-hmm.
It was good. It felt great once it closed. I know they were super excited and super happy and relieved once it was all said and done. Because first time buying a home for them, so they were pretty nervous. They were like, it's a big purchase. They were spending a lot of money, so they were very nervous. But I
Right.
think they're happy where they're at now. They're enjoying it. I went over, and they've done a lot of work to the place. So
That's
um,
good. Yeah.
yeah,
So just a pro tip for you consumers out there. Um, it's extremely important that you do not open new lines of credit in the
yeah,
middle of a home purchase, right? And so this is what he's talking about, right? Now, very select borrowers who have really good credit, have a lot of reserves, things like that. You can open a new line of credit and it may not affect your purchase, but more times than not, it will, right? So that's what we were trying to avoid. Where it's really hard because they're like, they want to, take advantage of the deals that are going on. They want to take advantage of the no interest. They want to take advantage of getting points on their card, but you have to wait till the transaction is done or you could possibly lose that deal. And I haven't had that happen to me, but I have seen it happen. And this is just another thing that popped in my head. Doesn't have anything to do with what you were saying, but changing jobs as well. You can't change jobs in the middle of the transaction because your job is essentially you saying, I have the ability to repay this loan, right? So if you switch jobs in the middle of it, you're now saying, I do not have that. And we based everything based off of your old, like what you've been getting paid, right? So I actually had a guy who decided to retire a week before closing, which you cannot do, right? So he was supposed to get a letter from unemployment for the money that he was going to be getting and for his pension and all of this stuff, and he couldn't get it in time, and he lost the house. He didn't tell us he was retiring or anything, right? And so stuff like that happens, and it's extremely important, and that's why where you as a realtor, even though you're like first to this transaction, you listened, right? You listened to the people around you, and you heard what we were saying, and we're like, make sure these certain things are done correctly, or it's going to be a problem. And I think that really shined through on the transaction, which is great, right? So
absolutely.
yeah, and so that was really fun. And the other thing with like getting, closer to the end of a transaction is the funding, right? And funding just means that the money that you said you're going to get paid gets sent over to the escrow company that's holding the money. And then that money gets sent over, and all the money gets sent over from the lender and everything like that. And that process can be really stressful too, because most people wire money, and they don't realize, they think that it's like doing a Venmo, right? Like I send it right now, it's there right now. That's not how it works. It can sometimes take a half a day, it can sometimes take a day for that to go through. And so if you're pushing yourself to the very end of your contract, and you could possibly miss that, right? And so these are things that you and I talked about very diligently in the process. And for new realtors, I would recommend making sure that you're asking your broker or your coach or whoever all the way through the process, like what are some things that can hang us up? And the funding's a big one. Making sure that that gets done, and that process you buffer, right? Because even on a 15-day close or 21-day close or 30-day close, those days I still have buffer days in between those, right? It's just a matter of knowing, what we need to get and how much we have ahead of time. And so we did that pretty well. You did that pretty well. And the other thing was, kind of back to the beginning of the kind of circling back to the beginning of the transaction. We were really diligent about having documents submitted before they asked for them, right? And that's something, unfortunately, it only comes with time as becoming an LO, doing enough transactions to know what you're going to get conditioned for. Every file gets conditioned for something. I've never seen a file not be conditioned. So we knew that certain documents were going to be requested, so I submitted them up front, and it saved us time, right? And so us being diligent like that is really what made the difference there, right? So
Right.
the last thing that was funny, I was like, all right, cool. Like, it looks like everything's gonna close. We're gonna be good to go. Like, how are they gonna get the keys? And you were like, well, I have to work, and they have to work because they're working and farming until like 6 or 7. I think they're gonna be working till like 7:30 that night. And I think eventually you worked it out, right? Like, you were gonna go pick up the key, or whatever. What happened with that?
So yeah, basically what happened was I told the realtor and I told the transaction coordinator from the get go. I was like, hey guys, I was like, my clients are working 12-hour shifts. I was like, there's paperwork that I do need to get signed, but I'm gonna have to send it to you super late in the evening. So, when it came time to close, time to get the keys, I did tell the realtor. I was like, hey, they're not gonna be off till about 7, somewhere around then. Um, and I was able to work it out. So he was like, "Hey, no worries." He's like, "I'll pick up everything from the house, take it." He's like, "Can you could just pick it up from my office, which just happened to be around the corner from the house." So I went over there, I picked it up, and then once my clients got home that night, I took the keys over. I got it to them, and then they're like, "Hey, let's go tomorrow. After work, we'll go together and take a peek at the house." And you know, and they were able to say it was theirs,
Right.
so it was good. They were happy.
Yeah. So another thing, kind of on the transaction side, right, is that you don't actually own the house until it records, and what that means is funding has been sent. Final documents have been signed in person in California. They have to be signed in person on both parties, right? So typically a seller will sign a little bit earlier than the buyer will. The buyer signs, and then everything gets sent back to the title company. The title company sends it over to the county that the home is being purchased in, and then it gets what they call recorded. So we're waiting for it to record. The funding has been done, money has been sent. We're waiting for it to record. And like Randeep said, we had Sutter had like a day or 2 day delay because of the way that their office works. And so a lot of people, they think once they sign the paperwork, they own the home. That's not the case, right? So you have to
Right.
be patient. I know it's so hard. You're like, I already sent all the money. I already signed the paperwork. But it's like you have to wait. And that's another thing you have to buffer for, right? Is that closing, that recording. And so a lot of people don't realize that in order to record in the day that a lot of people will sign the paperwork the day before, right? That paperwork needs to be at the recording office first thing in the morning to have any chance of recording that day. Most of the time, there's maybe like a 60%, 50% chance it will. Probably going to go to the next day, right? So you got to buffer for that day for you new realtors, for you consumers. You have to buffer that time, and that can be really stressful if you don't. But I think we did okay on that. We actually didn't know because I hadn't done any work in Sutter at the time. And so I didn't realize that it was going to be that long of a wait. But luckily, we had finished the loan stuff so fast that it was good to go. So you give them the key, they own the home. What's it feel like overall? Like, what is it? Did you think, okay, this is something that I want to continue to renew my license? And I think this is like something, obviously, I know you're never going to quit the state because you love working for the state. You're a state man. All right. That's been your dream since you were a little kid. You're like, I want to work at the state. Like, I want a firefighter and a fight. You're like, no, I want to work at the state. Right. But, you know, for a side thing to be able to help friends and family and maybe the occasional kind of random person who just needs somebody that's competent, what was your thoughts finishing the transaction?
So my thoughts were like, I'm definitely gonna keep my license. I'm definitely gonna, try to market myself some more to help more folks out. Because The best feeling was for my clients to tell people, after they told them they got a home, they said swing by, you come take a look at it. Was the fact they said, hey, you know, we got this home because of our realtor. They're like, without him, we wouldn't be in this position. We wouldn't own this home. They were like, for us, it was such an easy transaction because he did the heavy lifting. So the fact they gave me so much credit for helping them, it just made me feel great. Like, hey,
Mhm.
it was my first deal, and I felt, I was very happy to hear that, I did my job. I did what they wanted me to do, but beyond that as well. So the feeling that was there was amazing. So that, because of that, there was a couple folks that, hey, we are looking to buy a home. They're like, hey, we just want to wait a little bit, because the interest rates are going up. So they said, plus they wanted to, just save a little bit more for that, down payment and just
Mhm.
the other fees that come with purchasing a home. So they took my business card and they were like, hey, we will give you a call in the upcoming year or so, so I'll follow up with them. But it was just the fact they gave me so much credit is what's like, hey, I got to keep going. I got to help more folks out, and make purchasing their first home, a easy and smooth transaction.
Yeah, it's rewarding, right? To like
Yeah,
help somebody, right? It's not easy to get into a house in California. It's not. I totally empathize with people who are struggling with the rent hikes, who are struggling with the idea of how am I ever going to get into a home. And so, more so now than maybe, in a very long time, that feeling of being like, wow, like I did it well, and I got them into this home, and now they're a homeowner, right? And there's a lot of people who have problems with California, but ultimately, this is one of the best states and places you can live in the world, right? I mean, we have everything that you could want to do within an hour and a half to 2.5 hours from us. Beach, mountains, deserts, right? I mean, anything you would want to do like that. That's a unique experience, and mostly sunny skies year round, right? And so to be a property owner in California, which for all intensive purposes, so far as we don't see any drastic change in the United States economy, is a good place to own a home, and equity will continue to build, right? They are now on the housing ladder, and that's where we want them to be. It's such a rewarding feeling. And I know, when I did it and when I get to do it on the loan side as well, I always feel like, okay, like I get it, right? To me, working in nonprofit was, although it didn't pay well, it was so rewarding because we were making an impact, right? And this to me feels the same way if you do it right.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm very stoked. I'm happy for them. Um, they are super excited. They're having so many folks over. They're already telling me about all the stuff they're going to do to the house. So it's great for them. I'm happy for them to see what they're doing.
hmm
So
Yeah. So, and as we get close to wrapping up this podcast, I do want to say never count out a new realtor, right? But
right.
make sure they got people behind them. Make sure that they have a team that that they're working with people that are going to actually help them. Granted, it's the job of the broker to do that. A lot of realtors don't know that because they're not getting a lot of help from their broker, and that's for another podcast. But make sure that they're involved, right? And the other thing is, if you are working with a new realtor, ask them what they did before they were a realtor, right? I mean, if you would, Randeep, if people would have asked you, you could have told them of your successes and your triumphs for working in this nonprofit and excelling the way that you did, right? I mean, you got promoted, at least 6 to 9 months quicker than probably 99% of people who have ever been in scouting, right? You
Right.
got promoted very quickly. You got continued to move up because you did really well and you showed that leadership skills, and that transpired over to the real estate side. Now, traditionally, like I said, I would say don't go with the new realtor. Matter of fact, go with me. But if you're not going with me, right, then just make sure the person you're working with is competent. And if you're a brand new realtor, like Randeep said, lean on your team, right? Don't just say things to sound competent. Say, "Oh, I'll ask, I'll figure it out." Like, your clients will appreciate that. I think that's really important, right? And I think that's where you're currently at. I think you're doing a good job. And luckily, everything went pretty good and we made it work, right? So a lot more real estate hopefully coming out of Randeep Lally out in the Yuba area. If you're looking to do some work, we are currently trying to get him to learn how to use social media, to get business, to tell his family members and friends and coworkers that he does real estate if they need help, and that we can help him on lending, we can help him on real estate. He's a shy guy, as you can tell from that gorgeous face, but he's gonna do it. And so really excited to have you on, man. I know you don't have like a distinct social media that you are currently using for real estate or anything like that, but if you are in the Yuba area, feel free to reach out to the guy and let us know. And so are there any parting words that you have for new realtors that may help them?
Yeah. So the best advice I got was, which I mentioned earlier, was from was at Chico State. One of my professors always called in guest speakers, and it was an insurance class. So they talked a lot about sales, and his best advice was, hey, if you don't know the answer, tell them I don't know the answer. I will find out and I will get back to you, and just follow up on that promise of saying, hey, I will get back to you with the right answer. Never try to BS it, because that's only you're shooting yourself in the foot. Because the main thing about being a realtor, being in real estate, or being in the nonprofit like Mac and I were, is relationship building. That is the key to this. Because towards your client, what you are to them is you're their realtor, but most and foremost, they're gonna see you as a salesperson. They're gonna see that you're trying to make some money off of them, which is not what you want to see, which is not what you want them to see you as. So you want to build a relationship, and that starts with communication and telling them the truth. Be like, hey, look, I don't know the answer. I'm going to talk to my broker. I'm going to talk to my LO. I'm going to find out, and I'm going to get back to you. And just follow up on that promise of you saying, hey, I'm going to find out. I'm going to get back to you. Because in their mind, what they're going to be thinking is, hey, he's not lying to me, or she's not lying to me. And, they're starting to build that trust with you. They're going to start opening up to you. They're going to be like, okay, he's just not trying to make $1 off me. And that's where the relationship is going to start building. You're setting your foundation, and that's how you're going to be successful going forward. Because then that's how they're going to say, hey, Randeep was a great realtor. He's new, but he was super honest with me. He communicated with me. He made sure that all the answers he was telling me he found from, he talked to somebody experienced. It's like, hey, I'm going to go talk to my broker. I'm going to go talk to my LO, whoever it is. He went and found the answer, came back and told me, hey, this is the answer to your questions. These might be the side effects, or whatever it is how you're, it's just building your future. And that's how you're going to get out there as a person. Because if you lie to them, they catch you on your lie, you're losing all the business, not just from them, but the person they may have referred, and now who they may have referred. So that's how, it's the domino effect. So that's how it's going to work. So just don't lie to somebody, build a relationship with them. Even if it takes 6-7 months for them to get to close the deal, they may bring you 2-3 deals down the road. So, just focus on building a relationship and just stick to communication. Mac and I learned pretty quickly at our nonprofit that there was a lot of folks out there that can't communicate. We had a standard set to us of, hey, you get an email, it may take you, depending on what the email is, it may take you 2 to 3 days to figure out, everything, but within 24 hours, we were required to say, hey, I am confirming I got your email. I need some time to work on this. I will get back to you in X amount of time. And that was huge. Like, it was built into our brains. We've still carried that with us today, but we've learned that it's not a norm. We thought it was normal for, a 24-hour turnaround to communication. It's not the thing. So if you communicate better, you're already ahead of like 90% of the people, because there's a lot of folks out there, they don't know how to communicate with each other. So,
yep. For better or worse, I mean, that 24-hour thing is stuck in my head now. And I can't tell you how frustrated I get when it takes people days to reply. But as far as we go, we're 24 hours. I normally reply like within an hour. So, but either way, Randeep, thanks for being on, man. We appreciate it. And again, thank you guys all for listening in to the Hard Money Show, where we talk about real estate, home loans, and media. And as always, you guys have a good day.